So, I got the yellow ribbon. So, it's okay.
How many times did you sit back just relaxing? Understand movements coming in, yeah, we got the packs in. I don't really wanna see no more traffic. Last pack just came in, let's get it out quick.
I had a hard
Wanna be okay, wanna be alright.
number
Wanna see the world.
He loves Dean. He loves that family.
Well, let me tell you, Dean was a hell of a hockey player. And,
Yeah.
you know, and
We got a rookie card.
he's a great guy.
But he's from Michigan, like close to Canada.
I know.
Like, what do we do about that?
He's a
He's God now.
No,
been here long enough.
No, he's still Michigan.
we got. He's a registered coon-ass now.
He drives a boat, so
That's right.
This is true.
shout out Dean.
When I'd ask Dean, because we had this movie growing up, was Mighty Ducks, and they always had this flashback playing of one Emilio Estevez. He was the Mighty Ducks coach, and it was him as a child skating in the ice pond. So I always thought that vision of that was Dean in Michigan. So when I met Dean's mom and dad, that was the first question I asked them, and they were like, "No, really wasn't like that." Something there's like some old like English or German guy that has like a
Hans
that he fixes your skates at. So I got we grew up like, you ever seen Mighty Ducks?
Saw Mighty Ducks a long time ago.
Best hockey movie ever.
Yeah, that's one with the hockey players with the big glasses on them, the big glasses.
couple of them.
Yeah,
did,
couple, yeah.
It was just a bunch of hood rat kids, and Emilio Estevez was a hotshot lawyer, and he got a DUI, and the judge sentenced him to go coach these kids because they knew he had a hockey background. So.
He was Mark Sheen's son.
Then they cashed in on it. They went Mighty Ducks 2, Mighty Ducks 3.
There was
There's a show out right now on Disney.
Yeah, it was some hockey movie that, and I'm not sure it was Mighty Ducks, but these were big guys. These weren't kids.
Goons,
maybe. Yeah. No, there was one older one. I can't remember what it was.
That's what I'm talking about, the older one.
It had like the enforcers, like the guys that beat everybody.
They're always.
I think Mighty Ducks was inspired by that movie, to be honest.
Slingshot?
I don't remember the name of it.
Slapshot?
Maybe Slapshot.
I think I remember that movie.
The Miracle is probably, because it's based on a true story. The Miracle is about the U.S. beating the Russians.
That happened. That happened in 1981, I think.
You remember that?
Lake Placid. Oh Lord, Mike Eruzione was the cat. I'm telling you, the Russian team was they had professionals. You know, the American team was strictly amateurs.
Really?
You know, but the Russian.
Did we even have NHL at that point in America? So that was
you had NHL. Well, yeah. Let me tell you, the NHL was in Detroit, Chicago. I mean, Boston had Bobby Orr. Right. He was one of great. And
one sec, Garrett. Could you get on that computer, the iMac, and pull up AirPlay for us? Because when he starts referencing some of these people that I want to see, like. So Garrett can pull it up if you talk about what year of the championship. I didn't mean to cut you off, but if you bring up certain people's name that we don't know, he can pull them up, and then we can.
Yeah, I mean back in like the Montreal Canadiens, they had, it was the Canadiens that they had Maurice Rocket Richard. He was the first, biggie, I guess, in hockey, and Gordie Howe for Detroit. Was big, and then Bobby Orr came along with Boston, and he was, that's when he and Phil Esposito won the.
Did they have like back then? Did they have broadcasting, like for NHL hockey? Like
no, you never. Let me tell you, when I was growing up, back in the 50s and 60s, well, first of all, the Braves were still in Milwaukee. Houston wasn't a baseball team yet, so the closest team to us was St. Louis Cardinals, and they were across the Mississippi. So the only way we got baseball, looking at baseball or seeing baseball, was a Saturday game of the week. Falstaff put it on, and it was put on by CBS. Well, CBS owned the Yankees back then.
Oh,
so
really?
We all became Yankee fans. We had Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris and Elston Howard and Bobby Richardson and Moose Skowron. So everybody knew the Yankees. If you talked to anybody our age, we were all Yankee fans because that's the only team we would see. There was no baseball teams down here. Atlanta Braves.
You think
wasn't down here.
CBS kind of didn't show some games for that reason?
Well, they put on the Yankees every Saturday. Now, this was before cable television.
Yeah,
and
we're
everything.
talking like there's one channel.
Yeah, there's one channel. You had CBS, ABC, and NBC. That's it. You didn't have any other channels.
No streaming.
No streaming.
So
nothing.
we grew up on, what was it, 48 channels? So we grew up, like USA was 26.
Yeah.
You know, and talking back,
TBS
like, I remember like
25.
Silk the Shock, or is it Silk?
Yeah.
Silk and Stocks?
Silk stockings.
Silk Stockings.
Yeah.
That was stuff we did. Like, that's
Silk
what I
the
remember.
See, we were so, you know, I mean, even for us to see on Saturdays, we used to go to the Sanger Theater, you know, and they would show before the movie, or there was comedies on Saturday, you know, everybody pay, but before that they would show the news of the week, and it would be like Floyd Patterson and Sonny Liston fighting, and they'd show UPI would show, you'd see tape stuff of it, but that's what, or if you know, when you saw Mickey Mantle and all of them, you'd see tapes of them playing, but the only time you saw them live was when one of the big networks put them on. Well, CBS owned the Yankees, so they pretty much every CBS station across on Saturdays had the Yankees. That's why they became so popular, and they were the biggest city.
What you think? Back then too, did they show a lot of NASA? No, that was popular back in the day. Like, did they show a lot of like?
No,
they never gave like any kind of film or footage. I
remember the first time I saw something really that they focused on. Of course, matter of fact, I was in boot camp at Fort Polk when they landed on the moon.
Okay.
You know, they landed on the moon. That's also I was when Hurricane Camille hit. 69.
So you got out of town for that one.
69. So, you know, so I was out of town for that one, and then I went to Vietnam, and after that, and I came back. But then I was out of town for Katrina because I was with the Yankees.
How long were you in Vietnam for?
I was in there back then they could only keep you there 1 year. You could, in other words, when you went to a combat zone, you were there for 1 year, and the only way to keep you there is if you volunteered for another tour. It's not like now they can keep you long. If you got drafted, you were in for 2 years. After 2 years, you were out unless you extended. If you signed up instead of got drafted, then you had to spend 3 years. And a lot of people signed up during that time because if you got drafted around here when they started that draft, you were going infantry.
For sure.
For sure. I mean, you were going.
And y'all knew that right off the bat?
We knew that because they were taking everybody, you know. And now me, you know, I tried to be the smart kid. Finished Biloxi. I went to as long as you're in school, they couldn't take you. So I was at Perk, you know, and so trying to play basketball at Perk. Well, I thought, I wanted to go to Ole Miss. You know, so I said, you know, I'm going to be smart. I'm going to drop out after my first year at Perk. Instead of going back to Perk for my sophomore year, I'm going to work, get enough money. It'll only take me about, you know, half a semester. I'll work, then I'll have enough money to go to Ole Miss. So
you're dodging it.
Yeah, I was trying to get to where everybody, you know, when you're in school.
Respect, man.
So, I mean, it was getting bad then. I mean,
that was a smart idea for you to be like, you know what, I'll go to college for this.
Yeah, this was 1968, and this was the height of the.
And it wasn't like a lot of money. It wasn't like you're not getting like a new housing or any of that stuff.
No, I mean,
you're just going and fighting.
Yeah, you just go and they put you in barracks, and then they send you to basic training and then to advanced infantry training, and then. But the advantage of joining for the extra year is you got to pick a school that you after basic training to go to, and so I picked clerk typing because in school I could type. This was for computers, computer, but I could type those old typewriters where you threw the handle and type. I was good on it, and so I said, "Well, I'll do that."
You know how many words you did a minute?
70.
Dang,
I could do.
I don't even think I could do that.
Joe Dom, somebody beat you.
I could do 70 without a mistake, and that's now the reason I did that because at Biloxi High you could either take shop or take typing. Well,
who was your Biloxi High typing teacher? You remember her name or their name?
No, they changed so many. No, but I remember when I was at Biloxi High, Coach Coach Sabatini was there. Frank and Joe Sabatini were there. Coach Williams was a football coach. Coach Bodron was a basketball coach, and Coach Ferris was our baseball coach. We won the state championship in 1965.
Oh, heck yeah.
And we, I'll never forget, in that year, after we'd won the conference, we had to go to Petal to play the first round, and we played Petal 2 out of 3. We beat them 2 in a row. And then we had to go to Macomb, or play Macomb for a sudden death, 1 game, and whoever wins it goes to Jackson, plays as a South Division champion, playing a North Division champion. Well, we had to play at a neutral field in Hattiesburg. This was this old park in Hattiesburg that it was almost like Lee Street. Lee Street, where we played our games, Biloxi High, you had a right field wall that started out, but it was an old field where they play softball and everything, so the wall just went straight out. So as you move towards center field, in other words, it was getting deeper, the wall was getting deeper. Well, left field, there was no wall. There was railroad tracks across the street, so if you hit it over somebody's head or between them, it was almost an automatic home run because you
run forever.
Run forever. Well, anyway, Hattiesburg Park wasn't quite as bad as Biloxi because it did have a fence, but the fence was like 500 and something feet around. I mean, it was monstrous. And so, matter of fact, the lights on the park only went out to about 300 feet.
So it got dark behind.
And it got dark behind.
What's the name of this park?
It was Hattiesburg's oldest park.
That's so weird.
Garrett, can you try to find this park?
They used to play pro ball there.
That's so weird to me.
In Hattiesburg, this
that
is
they would
oldest
put you in
Hattiesburg
a sudden death
park.
game
in the 50s and 60s. It was an old Hattiesburg ballpark. And the pros played there. Some pros played. Maybe there could have even been some spring training there. But anyway, this thing was huge. I mean, just huge. And anyway,
Was it called Smokey?
I'm not sure. That was so long ago. It was it was in the 60s. Yeah. So that and it was old then when we were playing.
We did a podcast. It was like on the pass of Biloxi.
Yeah,
and we just love that stuff, like all the old buildings and stuff.
Oh,
I was thinking about Lady Luck the other day.
That might have been it. It came up, but anyway. So we go into the last inning, and we got a 2-1 lead, and the winner goes to play Jackson Morrow for the state championship, and we got a 2-1 lead. Well, there's a man on second. Hattiesburg's got a man. They batting last. Hattiesburg's got a man on second, and this big old kid comes up for Hattiesburg, and we're winning 2-1. All we got to do is get out, or if they somehow get the 2 runs in, they win it. Well, Jimmy Howarth.
I know Jim.
You know Jimmy? Well,
and Rotary Club with him.
Well, Jimmy was our center fielder. Now, Jimmy went on to
played for the Giants, didn't he?
Played for Mississippi State, then played for the Giants, and actually was the guy that when Willie Mays retired, Jimmy took his place the first year as an
I got his baseball card. I got it autographed.
Yeah.
A couple of them.
So Jimmy was in center field, and this kid hits one. I remember Jimmy Wallace was pitching, and he hit one, and Howard just turned and started running toward it because this ball was crushed. And right when he got to the edge where the lights, it started to dim and get dark, he got there and he dove. Out there, the ball was coming down, and we couldn't see, whether he caught it. But I'll give the second base umpire credit. He ran all the way out there when that ball was hit. Normally, they wouldn't have thought to do that. Yeah. But he ran all the way out there, and so all we could see was Jimmy and almost just his feet
going into the shadows.
Out, and the umpire standing out, and the umpire raised his hand, and so Jimmy caught it. And so we went to the state championship. We beat Jackson Morrow, and
that was the end of it.
That was it.
Was that the first big ring you won?
No, they were those. I'll tell you what they did for us. The Superdome. I mean the. Houston Astrodome was just built.
Okay.
1967 or 60, whatever it was, 66. They gave us all a trip out there. They took the team out there.
That's cool.
for the to the Astrodome when it 66, I guess 65.
Go to Astros game.
65, yeah. Went to Astros game. It was the Astros, and I think it was Cincinnati was playing. But back then it was Larry Durker and Luis Aparicio and
I watched the documentary on that stadium.
Yeah.
Like there's a documentary about like how it first started and how they built it and how it brought so many people.
Oh, well,
it was like a a theme park.
It was like they named it the eighth wonder of the world. I mean, but it wasn't named that, but they referred to that as that. But I mean, it was just such a huge, and it was indoors.
And there wasn't that many stadiums built like that, right? A state of the art.
First one. That was the first one. There was no indoor stadiums. Everything was outdoor. Everything.
I've been there a couple of times. Whenever my dad had cancer, we used to go over there. Because I don't know if that's the same stadium that they're in now.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
it should be.
Yeah, the Superdome. I mean, the Astrodome's never changed. Now, the Astros play in Minute Maid Park now, but they used to play in the Astrodome.
It was like in the early 90s.
I mean, it was huge, and then they started after that. Because of weather in baseball.
Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Yeah.
Right now we are with a baseball legend in the scout
Biloxi
world.
legend for sure.
Biloxi legend. He's a scout.
Peter Roy Elder. Welcome to the
got a
studio.
bunch of rings.
Yeah.
So he's flexing. He's got a big ring on right now.
Right place at the right time.
But so this, go ahead and introduce our guests. You got it?
Yeah, Peter Roy Elder. Let's see. I got to listen to you talk one time at Rotary Club. Actually, I think Jim was the
connection.
He brought you in. He was the speaker chair that month. But I got some questions. When did you? I guess you found your love for baseball there. Obviously, you just told us a story about the draft and having to go to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And where'd you find time to come back and get these connections to open up doors to get you this job?
Well, it's almost like anything. It's being at the right place at the right time. I started out, like I said, Biloxi High played. We all played all sports: baseball, basketball, football, track, golf. There was no soccer. And a few guys played tennis, but pretty much those four sports were the major sports for all the kids. And we'd play them, after school in the parking lots, and there was no computers. There was no, you played till it got dark, and then you went home. And so, anyway, we were very active, and everybody was really, and no knock against this generation, but, there were a lot of athletic kids back then because that's all we did. We were out there, went to school, did our homework, then went out and played, did something. You played baseball, you played basketball, you did anything until it got dark. So anyway, I played all the sports, and we were fortunate to win the state championship in '65, and we always had great baseball teams, always had great football teams at Biloxi High. Great athletes, and
Who was the worst back then? Out of the counties, D'Iberville, St. Martin, Springs.
See, back then we were still part of the Big 8 conference, and the Big 8 conference back then. I mean, pretty much when the Big 8 conference started, you had the South Division and the North Division. Well, the Big 8 were 8 big schools, and I think, and this is probably got to be wrong, but I remember the big schools in the South. It was Moss Point, Pascagoula, Biloxi, Gulfport East, Hattiesburg, Laurel.
Oh, St. Martin wasn't even there.
Oh no, none of they weren't even. It was just the Big 8 schools. That Moss Point was probably the smallest Big 8 school there. Then you had the North Division, up with Greenville and Jackson Murrah and Jackson Provine and Jackson Central, and so then meet at the end of the year for the championship. And when we didn't make it, I remember we played we'd play in a shrimp bowl, which was the big bowl game.
Yeah, I got to play in the shrimp bowl whenever I was a kid. St. Martin played it.
Yeah, there wasn't many high schools bowl games around, but Biloxi had one of the biggest. And I'll never forget. It was my senior year. We played South Lafourche, and Art Cantrell was a junior at South Lafourche. Then we played them in a shrimp bowl, and Biloxi High beat them, but Cantrell gained like 350 yards rushing, 400 yards rushing. But
Cree's Creek Cantrell?
Yes.
That's his grandpa?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And no, Creek. No, that's a different Cantrell.
Different Cantrell.
Yeah, that's a different Cantrell.
Let's
But
give you some cool credit.
he was from South LaForge, and Arthur came up and he was in Louisiana. He had missed a couple of years of school, so he had to go back. And in Louisiana, you can only play sports up until you're 19.
Okay.
When you're 19, you can't play. In Mississippi, you can play till you're 20. And you can, so pretty much you can play as 19 as Mississippi, and Louisiana you can't.
It's crazy to think there's 20-year-olds playing against like 15-year-olds.
Yeah, right. And because back
What's it now? What is it now?
I think it was It's 19.
well back in now you got to remember too. Back in the 60s, it was 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. That was high school. Junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th.
Okay.
So there wasn't no there was no thing as middle school.
Now 9th is high school.
Now 9th is high school, I guess, in a lot of the schools.
Times are
So you take a
changing.
freshman and you can move them straight up.
Yeah, well, this is, you're ninth grade, you were ninth grade. So you played basically at 16, 17, 18. But so anyway, Yankee Bohanovich, who was the big booster at Yankee Stadium, he got Cantrell over here and living with him over here, and he played for Biloxi. And of course, he made Biloxi High a superpower, and then went to LSU and became a star.
There's
at
a
LSU.
lot of schools that still do that.
Yeah. Well, nowadays, but back then it was very, very rare. You didn't change schools. There was no private schools to go to.
Where was your rival?
Always Gulfport.
Do you have any stories of you fighting in school that you can share with us, like after the game?
Well, being the fact I got in 50 fights, I was 1-49. I won one.
Who was that?
Because I don't know, she was tough though. She was a tough guy, but I was very small in high school. I was about, I think when I graduated, I was like 5'8" and weighed like 121 pounds, 122 pounds small.
Yeah.
I did most of my growing, believe it or not, in Vietnam. I went over the year I was in Vietnam. I had a growth spurt, and I was 20 then, and so I was a late growth spurt. But anyway, so that was, we always played all kind of sports, and then after that I went to Perk, and I tried to walk on at Perk in basketball because I was a decent basketball player. I had the curse of being decent in all the sports, but not real good.
Just enjoyed playing them.
Yeah, not a star in any of them. But well enough to be able to compete in all of them. But I had one thing: I had speed. I could run. There wasn't, many could beat me. So I went to Perk thinking I could walk on and play basketball, and I didn't. So I didn't make the team. So finished out the year, and I had the bright idea. I said, well, I'll go home and I'll sit out a year, make some money, go to Ole Miss. Been an Ole Miss fan my whole life. I stayed in. I can remember when Billy Cannon made that run in I guess it was 58, made that run on Halloween night. I wouldn't even go trick-or-treating that night. I had to listen to the Ole Miss game and then just like a kid boo-hooed because Ole Miss got beat. We had Jake Gibbs. I was just eat up with Ole Miss. So that's where I really wanted to go. But then the one thing that exposed you to the military was not being in school. Every school had to report you to the draft board if you weren't enrolled in school. So I wasn't enrolled, and I thought I could make money, then get back in school for it. But they they drafted me. So before I had to report, I went down and I joined to get that one extra year, but it gave me
you had to choose.
Yeah, they were coming after you anyways.
Yeah, they were going to come after you, but so I said, something, I'll do that, and I'll get into a job probably safer than infantry.
No doubt.
That type of thing. So anyway, it worked out, and I went to Fort Riley basic training. Then my first duty station, believe it or not, was supposed to be the Panama Canal Zone. And when I got to orders, I said, wow. I said, Panama Canal Zone. And then while I came to Biloxi home on leave, that's when they closed the Panama Canal Zone. The United States didn't own it anymore. They closed it. So they reassigned me to Fort Riley, Kansas. So I went up to Fort Riley, Kansas, and I was there for a year. And then I got reassigned to West Point Military Academy. So I was up at West Point for a bit, and I only had I had 14 months left to go. And once you get under 12 months, they can't ship you overseas. That's one of the. And so they got me with 13 months to go.
They knew that. They had you tagged on there, and
so
they're just waiting.
I ETS, extended time of service, out of Vietnam, and I was in Da Nang, but I was in a good place. I was at China Beach. They had an old TV show about China Beach.
Can you pull up China Beach?
Yeah, that was an old TV show in the late probably 70s about China Beach, but that's exactly where I was at. That's it, Dana. That right there, and it was about
the old
it was about
TV.
Army.
Look at that,
and that's where I was. I was.
So
China
the
Beach.
show was actually about the war.
Yeah. It was a spoof, But what
Like
it was,
Match or something.
China Beach was it was on the South China Sea, and it was between two mountains. The beach, it was Monkey Mountain and Marble Mountain.
Everybody says it's beautiful over there.
Well, now it is. It's a 5-star resort now, but back then they didn't. The roads weren't even paved. I mean, you couldn't. I remember one time I had to go over to 24th Corps, and to get there you had to fly across Monkey Mountain because you didn't want to take a convoy over Monkey Mountain because it was a trap. You got every convoy got ambushed over there. And when the general asked me to take papers over there, I said, "Oh my goodness!" I said. So I talked to one of the warrant officers, one of the helicopter pilots. You had to be a warrant officer to fly helicopters. I asked him. I said. I had to pay him, of course. I said, "Can you fly me over here? Then fly me back." And he says, "Yeah, I'll do that for you." Now, believe it or not, this led to something a little special. He flew me over to 24th Corps, and I delivered the papers. And then there was another set of papers I had to take to this outpost that was it was called a fire zone. And it was the northernmost fire zone outpost in South Vietnam. It was right across the street, right across the demilitarized zone from North Vietnam. You could actually see into North Vietnam from here. And I went over there to take these papers, and I ran in to take the papers. And the guy that was sitting in a little bunker, acting as a kind of a clerk, was high school teammate from Biloxi High. Only person I've ever known that I saw in the Army.
Wow.
Ever. I've never seen anybody since then.
You were in like the heat of it.
That was cool though.
His name was Bill Hunt.
Did you know he was there?
No. I walked in, I gave it to him, I looked at him like that, and he was a tight end for Biloxi High. He was a year younger than me. But
in Vietnam though, did y'all have like villages, bars? Did y'all ever experience the nightlife?
Yeah, well, they did down in Saigon. Saigon Saigon was wild. It was a wild, wild west down there. But up in Da Nang, which was the second largest city, Da Nang, we were also combined with an R&R center. Now, an R&R center is a rest and relaxation. It was an in-country R&R center. What they would do is now they had like a tiki bar out on the beach. They had a big building for that they fed people that were there. What would happen is, say, people from the 101st Airborne been out in the bush, going on patrols, getting shot out, no bath. Well, you had to give these kids a break sooner or later. So after about 3 months, they would send them on a weekend R&R in country without leaving the country. So they'd send them to China Beach. Well, when they got over there, they would get rowdy. They were drinking and fighting, and I mean, it was a wild, wild west. But it was beautiful over there. But so us being stationed there, permanently, we could go over to the R&R center and eat because they serve steaks every night and potatoes every night.
Nice.
The big thing and
music.
Everything. They had a band in the little lounge called the Soul Sisters. and they were Korean, Seoul, Korea.
Hilarious.
It was a Seoul system. And of course, those GIs they'd yuck it up, and there'd be fights, and there'd be.
Do you remember the price of a beer back then? Do you remember going up? Like, do you remember?
I remember cigarettes were a quarter. Beer couldn't have been more than 20 cents.
Did you guys ever get to see any big acts that they flew out of America over there?
The big acts?
Yeah.
No. We, when it first started, when in Vietnam, they, Ann Margaret used to go and Bob Hope. They would go to Saigon or they would go to places, but China Beach was, it was kind of hard to get to. You had one flight.
It sounds really nice, though.
Oh, now they I hadn't. Everything I've seen has been a 5-star resort now in China Beach, but it's it was just a tough. Freedom Field was a runway that you landed in and you left out of, and beside that, the only way you can get in this, because we were in a valley between Monkey Mountain and Marble Mountain, and there were very few passes that you could get in there, without getting because they would. I'll tell you what was so bad about that war. We were handcuffed. Because it was the first publicized war really ever, where it was actually shown on television like CBS and the major channels. So they saw atrocities, just like the My Lai incident where William Calley, the lieutenant, where they killed all those, but they were infiltrated with Viet Cong was mixed in them. So you didn't.
That's CBS with protest and war.
Yeah,
and pushing narrative and agenda.
Wow.
Yeah, it was all they were protesting.
Cool. Oh, that was crazy.
It was best. So we were very the war was very unpopular. So they didn't. You just didn't. They didn't send a lot of. They didn't try to. Once the atrocities coming out on both sides. Let's face it. You had to survive. You had to do what it took to survive over there. And
Did you know like your going home date, or did you have like marked on the calendar, or did they just give you a piece of paper saying you get to go home today?
No, you had it marked when you came home. You knew you counted the days. Now, like I said, I was lucky I didn't have to go out on patrol. And
do you think that's a big part of back then in Vietnam, especially Vietnam veterans, like drugs, and then coming back and there's a lot of them that are homeless.
Oh yeah, it was. I'm telling you,
there's got to be so much drugs going on over there.
The biggest fear, I think that most of us had in Vietnam, really was friendly fire. You get. Let's face it. They were out there smoking weed, and if you get in a beef with somebody and you're out on patrol, and you got somebody that and you get in a firefight,
or goofing off
or anything. But the worst part was thinking, somebody that you had a riff with, could be behind you down when you're in a firefight, and all of a sudden
let one fly on accident.
Yeah, on that you get popped and nobody knows where it came from. No, So it was. It was. It was wild, wild west over there. There wasn't a lot of regulations. Over there it was. Nobody wanted to be over there.
What was it? M1 Grand as your gun? M14?
No, we had we did basic training with M14. Those were heavy. Those were almost like an M1. Yeah. But over there we had M16, very light, very.
Oh.
Yeah, it was, and it was an automatic and semi-automatic. You could click it
back and forth,
and one shot at a time, 20 rounds, or you could put it on rock and roll and pull the trigger, and 20 rounds come flying.
Spit out like in a second.
Do you remember how many magazines you were carrying on you? And
well, you had to have a minimum of 10. You stuck them everywhere. If you had the only time I had to go out and patrol, it really wasn't patrol. It was night guard, and we were at Da Nang Support Command. Now, the Da Nang Support Command had General Sweeney there, who was Military Region 1 commander. He was a major general, and there was only 3 regions of Vietnam: Military Region 1, 2, and 3. Well, he was Military Region 1.
Gary, can you try to pull this guy up?
Commander. His name was General Sweeney, Arthur Sweeney.
This is sick.
His name was Arthur Sweeney, and he was Military Region.
Was he a nice guy?
Arthur Sweeney. That's him. Right. The next one with the glasses. His name's Arthur. Next one down. That's him.
How about Arthur?
Yeah, he was that's him, just General Sweeney.
That's sick.
And he was Military Region 1 commander. So, and they had the Philco Ford people stationed there too, which were the people that did the infrastructure there. So it was a safe compound we were on. But what they did is they cleared the tree line out 300 yards, and then they dug a bunker around the whole compound so you couldn't get overrun easily, And then from the bunker they cleared it out another 250 yards out, and then it was tree line, So every, even though I was General Sweeney's kind of aide and typist, and I still had to go out on the perimeter once a week, and it was on Wednesdays. And I'd get off, he'd leave the office, General Sweeney. That's the first time I've actually seen him since '69.
That's cool, man.
Anyway, he would, I'd have to take him back to his quarters. Then I'd go back to the office and I'd have to buff the floors. Then I had to go out there to that perimeter on Wednesday night. And you go out there and you were 25 yards apart. And you stayed there, the whole night, from 7 o'clock at night till 6 the next morning. You had to stay there all night. So the only caveat was that every 150 yards, somebody had to be out in a tree line. You had to go out in that tree line 300 yards out, 250 yards out. And every night, so I never got picked except one night. One night, a captain comes walk around, and he's counting. And I can see him counting and coming upon that boy, and I'm starting to count myself. And I looked, I said, oh, no. And he comes, he said, 15. He said, tree line. I said, oh, no, that's the last place you want to be. And that night it was raining. It was pouring down rain because you had a monsoon season in Vietnam, which was absolutely, it could rain for like 3 months straight, every day and every night, nonstop. So, but it was raining this night. So I got out to the tree line, and there was these big elephant ear plants and everything. So there were trees, and so I got to this big tree, and I got up under it, and I put everything back there, but it was still raining. My boonie hat I had on was dripping water, and I had the M16 and my 45, and I had my walkie-talkie. Well, to talk back to the base, they were Red Dog. That was the code name was Red Dog, and so we were Blue Angel out in the Blue Angel was the perimeter.
Okay.
And if you got out to the tree line, it was Green Duck. You identified yourself as Green Duck. So I'm sitting out there, and I guess it got to be about 10:30, and I've been out there about 2.5 hours, and it was raining harder and harder. And I was up, and I remember I had one of those banana leaves around me, and I had everything turned up. It was raining, and it wasn't cold, but it was just miserable.
Miserable, yeah.
All of a sudden, that thing crackles, and it says, Red Dog, Green Duck, come in, Green Duck. And then, and you clicked, and it said that you were on.
Right.
You didn't say nothing. It said, be advised, it says VRN, and that was Vietnamese Regular Army. It wasn't a Viet Cong. Viet Cong were the like the ops guys all today to see,
Navy SEALs.
Yeah, the regular Vietnamese Army that was
their infantry,
the troops, the companies, and it said Vietnamese regulars in the area, and I said, oh no, not tonight, and I'm under there like that. Now you're starting, anything, if you're trying to sleep, anything you hear, praying. Yeah. Oh Lord, I was an altar boy at Nativity. I prayed, but I could hear, all of a sudden, everything I heard was something. I could hear, I could hear a branch crack. And you think automatically, that's him. There.
Hair's coming on the back of your neck.
Oh, and I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but about 12:30, I heard something actually walking through. Now, you don't know what it was, whether it was an animal, whether it was know what, but you heard leaves being stepped. I said, "Oh my Lord!" And boy, and I got on the thing, and I went by. I said, red dog, green duck, activity, and they're supposed to, we got helicopters out on there's, but anyway, I'm in, and I can hear it, and I could hear it, and I got my M16, and I got my finger on the trigger, and now you're praying, that they don't walk up on you.
Right.
You're out there 300 yards by yourself out there, or if they come up on you, it's a knife. And I'm telling you, I started with the Hail Fathers, the Hail Marys, and I'm saying, and I can remember, I do remember shaking. I mean, you can't help but shake.
Oh yeah,
Shit, it's gonna be scary as shit. Your body,
and my finger was on that trigger, and it actually, after about maybe an hour and 10 minutes, Red Dog says, VR area clear. No contact. That means, nothing. They sent like that. And so I can remember my finger was frozen, fear frozen on that. I couldn't get it
off of there.
Unhooked,
I can't imagine that.
I kept pulling it, trying to get it off that so I could pull it out of the thing. In this thumb, I couldn't move it. I actually got frozen hand on it.
Well, I mean, you got to think you were in the woods. There's nobody around.
100 yards was the next guy.
Yeah, I'm saying a branch would break or something flew off the tree.
Yeah,
and you're sitting the whole time
it was. Yeah, you don't know what you don't know if this is
if
it.
they're watching you.
Yeah, you don't know if they're watching. If this is it, or they're going to sneak up on you.
Should I be pissing on myself, man? I would definitely be pissing on myself.
I tell you one thing. And then I'll never forget when 6 o'clock came, and they called us back in.
Just running.
I looked like Usain Bolt hitting across it. I mean, I was flying, and of course the guys they laughed. They see me coming in. I was, but I think that's the most frightful I've ever been that one time. And it's funny now, but back then,
it's scary.
It's
just I think it's funny that you're expressing these stories. Most people will be like, "No, I was there, smoked 3 cigars, I nunchucked 2 people," and you're like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like some of your friends, they'll tell their stories instead of them admitting what really happened. They're like, "No, I killed 5 people."
Well, that's like when
don't tell nobody.
That's when when I got roasted.
For the Biloxi first.
Last
Lord of the Rings.
My nephew, little Jeff Elder, he's one of the roastees.
Yeah.
He says, and boy, he brought the house down to their knees. He said, my Uncle Peter, I always tell us how he was going hand to hand with the Viet Cong with a knife in his teeth like that. He said the first time he had an encounter with Vietnamese when he tried to buy crab meat on Oak Street over there. About three chairs fell out there.
That's funny. So you leave that environment, you come back here. Now we want to know the scouting. How did this get
it's amazing. I came back here. I wound up going back to Southern, graduating from Southern, coming back home, and actually Mr. Yankee Bahanovich came part of my life. He was on the commission of the Mississippi Coast Coliseum, which was just about to open in 1977. And so I saw Mr. Yankee, and we talked, and I told him I had a degree in business and administration and marketing, and he says, "Oh, I got a job for you." And I said, "Yeah, what?" And he says, "I'm going to get you the job as a first ticket manager, box office manager at the Mississippi Coast Coliseum when it opens." And I said, "Yeah, let's do that." So anyway, I was the first box office manager ever.
Do you remember? Do you remember what you were making an hour? Your weekly pay?
Oh Lord, yeah. Let's see. I remember I was making 12. I was making $12,000 a year.
That's a lot. But, I mean,
well, this is 1977. I was 12. I think the next position. I think Bill Holmes was the comptroller, and I think he was making 19 to 20, and Gene Lambert was the director. I think he was making 30, 35. And that was, but around the, Cole's brand new thing opening.
Here, could you find the equivalent of 1977 to today's money, please?
Yeah, 1977. So I thought,
grand's probably a lot. I mean,
oh, look, I said, wow. I said, this is, this, but it was the thrill of this brand new thing in the Mississippi Gulf Coast coming to fruition. And actually, our first act was Elvis.
I was going to ask, what were some of the acts?
Elvis was going to be the opening act. And believe it or not, we hadn't moved into Coliseum yet. We were in the Bailey Holmes building, which was right next door.
Was Matt McDonald there?
No. Okay. Matt wasn't. This was way before Matt.
Okay.
And then we had all the tickets out. The only three, I guess, higher level people were the pecking order was Gene Lambert, director. Bill Holmes. We had no assistant director. We had a comptroller. He was the comptroller, and then I was the box office manager. And then we had the executive secretary, and we would have people, in marketing and stuff like that. And but Elvis was going to be our first act, and we were going to open in November 1977. I had the tickets out. I had them sold. Every people had got them, and that's when Elvis died.
Wow.
He died on August 16th, 19.
On the toilet.
Yeah. So we replaced him with Charlie Pride, who was another Mississippian. Yeah. And he was our first act. And then I'll never remember our second was Blue Oyster Cult.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Blue Oyster Cult. And we, back in that day, we had Foreigner, we had Blue Oyster Cult, we had,
we got that in that new room there. With all the old tickets from all.
Did you ever?
shows
Did you ever, when you were after your tickets? Did you ever go sneak and watch the bands?
Oh, all the time. I mean, once the tickets sale, my job was it was hectic because you had ticket points out. Pascagoula, a Picayune. You had Hattiesburg. They had all come in, bring their tickets in. We had to settle up, and I had to settle up because at the end of the night, when that manager came in. The manager of whatever act, he got paid that night. So, we had to pay and make sure the money was there. So we had to settle up all the tickets, the tickets not sold and the tickets sold. We had to show him the unsold tickets, and then you set up. So that took a good part of the night. And so I got to see very little unless at the very end, if they came out once or twice or 3 times, but I'd always meet like Dolly Parton came into my ticket office to get tickets for some of her family.
Ooh.
Lawrence Welk came in with Captain and Tennille. We had great acts coming there.
This is the Coliseum when still the dome where it had the grit, the concrete. It was
it was just that we had mostly just the dome.
Okay.
It was only dome, and then we had a little bitty small room that was kind of.
Did you have the ramps?
You had the ramps going up to second.
Okay.
Yeah, but you had a little room, small. It was said convention center, but it was just a little ballroom hall. That was all it was back then. It was very, very. It was. I remember that full out. It was 11,000. The whole Coliseum top, and if we did half shows, if we'd do a half show like that, it was 6,000, and we just put curtains up and only used half of the thing. But we used to have boxing matches, wrestling matches, but it was a great time. We flourished, but then leading up to the baseball, one of my cousins, I'm kin to the Brauns. He had Braun Cadillac in Orlando, which was the 5th largest Cadillac dealership at the time, and that's the one that was my cousin. He was the youngest Cadillac dealer ever, and they put him on Time Magazine, the front Time Magazine, which was a biggie back
huge,
then. Yeah. So he was visiting home, and we would talk. We were having dinner, and he says, the Orange County Coliseum in Orlando is looking for an assistant director. And the pay was like $40,000. I said, "Oh my Lord!" He said, "Why don't you come interview for it?" He said, "I'll get you set up. I know the guy. You can interview for it, and see if you do it." So I left and I didn't leave because I went for the weekend. I went there and to interview. I was supposed to interview on a Tuesday. I got there in Orlando on a Thursday. Well, Thursday and Friday, I'm just sitting in the showroom and I'm watching these guys, these salesmen, these car salesmen, you know, and I mean they're selling Cadillacs, they're selling like that, and so they got paid on Friday. One of them I come up, tell him I'd made friends with. His name was Jim Agnew, and he got his paycheck, and this was a weekly paycheck, you know. And I was teasing with him. I said, "How much we take home this week?" He says, pretty good week." He said, 4,400.
What year was this?
This is 1979, 80.
Okay, in 77, or so in 77 though, your 12,000 was equivalent to like 60 grand.
Yeah,
that's pretty dope.
Yeah, but anyway, I saw that, and I had a background in accounting and in management, and so I told him, Eric, I said, something, I'm not interested in that job. I said I'd like to become your comptroller here. He said, we'll do that, but you said you got to learn the business. You got to sell cars first. You got to learn how to sell cars. I said, I'll do it. So I started out. I sold used cars, new cars, and then I became the F&I man, the finance manager. I was the one that when you came in, I'd tell you what the records were. Hit you in the back end, get you everything. And so
you that underspray.
That underspray. We could always. It's called undercoat, and you put the undercoat on. It was called rust proofing, and so that was always dealer add-ons, and so anyway, that led to us. Eric opened another dealership in Ocala, and there was a
spring training.
There wasn't, not in Ocala at this time. There wasn't.
Okay.
But George Steinbrenner, who owned the Yankees, had a horse farm in Ocala. It was called Kinsman Stud. And anyway, when I went to Eric sent me up to Ocala to open this new dealership, and I opened it. And of course, when you go up there, you try to make friends with the people around you. You got to try to make business contacts. So I made friends with a guy called Don Stimley. Well, Don Stimley happened to be Steinbrenner's private pilot, and he lived in Ocala, and he kept the plane in Ocala, although George was in Tampa. His main residence was in Tampa. And so whenever George needed the plane, Donnie would fly the plane.
What's George's last name?
Steinbrenner.
Gary, could you pull up George Steinbrenner?
He actually bought the Yankees in 1973. He and 9 other investors bought the Yankees from CBS in 1973.
This guy right here.
That's him right there.
George Costanza worked for him.
That's right.
Jeez.
But anyway, Steinbrenner was I'll tell you what Steinbrenner was.
The hustler.
He was the son of his daddy, Henry Steinbrenner, MIT graduate, started a shipping company up in the Great Lakes. They were from Cleveland. He was from Cleveland, Ohio. Started a shipping company, Steinbrenner Shipping, up there. Well, he made a fortune up there. George, his oldest son, became the heir apparent when Henry died. And I tell you, George was responsible for most of the maritime laws that passed up in the Great Lakes.
Oh.
He was a go-getter, a mover and shaker. He'd do deals with politicians. He connected with all the politicians. So he became really, really, really powerful up there.
Well connected. Right.
But he was always he owned the Cleveland Cavaliers when they were almost like a minor league basketball team. Lost money in that. His dad wouldn't bail him out. Said, you got yourself in, you get yourself out. So he became a tough negotiator, tough businessman. He's German. He was really, really, really a tough guy. It was his way of the highway. So he got together when the Yankees became for sale by CBS in 1973. He got together a group of 9 other investors. Okay, and they bought the Yankees, and they bought the Yankees for $10 million. Each of them put up $1 million.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
$10 million for the Yankees. Yankees are worth
billions,
maybe $5 billion $10 billion now. Anyway, Steinbrenner, they named Steinbrenner managing general partner. So that means he was the manager. Now, he was a taskmaster. He came right away out. He stormed New York. It was his way or the highway. He started. I mean, if he didn't like something, he was vocal. He'd fire you. Fired Billy Martin 5 times. He'd run you off. Well, anyway, long story short, getting back to that, Steinbrenner would come to Ocala on the weekends and see his horses, because George had horses, ran a Kentucky Derby and all this. So anyway, I got to meet him through Don, because I told Donnie, I said, I really need to meet your boss one time. Donnie said, no problem. He said, he's coming here Saturday, and we can have breakfast at the Ramada Inn, which was where all the locals met for breakfast. Horseman, Bonnie Heath, owner Ramada Inn, and Bonnie Heath was a Oklahoma oil man that owned Needles, and Needles was a Kentucky Derby winner, one of the early Kentucky Derby with the horse Needles, and Bonnie Heath was the old man that owned it. So George liked to have hang with Bonnie Heath and all the other horsemen. Harry Mangurian owned the Boston Celtics. He was down there. He had a farm down there, big place down there. So a lot of wealthy and a lot of important people down there. Well,
it was a men's club.
Yes, it was. Perfect men's club. And I got introduced to George with Donnie. And fellas, it was just it was a blessing in disguise. George kind of just took a liking to me because I had a lot of the unuseful information. Like, I knew every Heisman Trophy winner back then, from the first one in 1935 all the way through.
You're a trivia guy.
I was a trivia guy, and George.
We're going to Buffalo Wild Wings, dude.
Donnie told George that, and Donnie, this intrigued George. So Johnny started. Steinbrenner started saying, he was
using you as Google.
Yeah, who's and I named every one of them.
That's true. You were.
So he took a little bit of liking to me, and another fact that he happened to spend some Army time at Camp Shelby up in Hattiesburg, of all places.
Damn.
So we started talking. Anyway, there was about 6 of us who were like his little, groupies. We weren't on his level by any chance, but George was a man's man. He liked to take his plane, go to Kentucky Derbies, pin relays, Super Bowls, and he'd take us with him, but he wouldn't know wives. It was just us. He was a guy's guy, and we'd jump on his plane and we'd go. So anyway, fast forward 8 years later, we become really good friends. He liked me, but I want to reiterate, I was nowhere near his level. I was just like a hanger-on with George, but he really was fond of me. And so in the meantime, while I was up there, Eric and I had started a little computer company called Market Media.
Garrett, pull this up.
It was believe me, it was a little in Market Media we had little 13-inch computer screens, okay, and we would set it up in lobbies of a hotel on the desk or in elevators, and what we do, I had a graphic artist. She'd come in and she'd run. Like if I sold you an ad on for your thing, she'd draw up your logo and everything, and then the screen would change every 15 seconds. It would change one row, so it was like a rolling little indoor billboard before the big billboards came out. I'll tell you what it was close to. When you pull up a go to a gas station and you're pumping gas and you see those little things, that's what we were. But it was graphics. It wasn't video. So anyway, I toyed around with that. So about 8 years after this, later, it was around 1988. We decided to sell it. Eric and I decided to sell it because we were about at the break-even point. We were getting out. We made a little bit of money, but not a whole lot. And so I was eating breakfast one morning. Here comes George in. It's on a Friday, and he walks in. And he walks over and he sits down and he says, "I heard you sold your company." I said, "How did you know?" I just did it Wednesday. I hadn't told anybody. Said, yeah, he said, "I know everything." He said, "What you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know." I said,
So he knew you were there.
Oh yeah. He said,
it was planned.
He said, "What you going to do?" I said, I don't know. I said, I'll do something. I said, I'm going to give it maybe a month or two and see what I want to do. He says, want to come with the Yankees? I said, come with the New York Yankees? He said, now this is my childhood. He says, yeah. I said, as what? He says, oh, he said, come in the front office. We'll yuck it up. We'll have some laughs. We'll
He missed you being around you.
Yeah, I mean, he enjoyed himself when because you know what he could do. He could come down to Ocala and let his hair down.
Yeah,
and he didn't have to worry about the media, looking at it anyway. But so I said, something, George. I said, let me run this by Deb. It's my wife. And he says, okay. He said, look. He says, I'll be in here tomorrow. He says, just talk tonight, and I'll bring you tomorrow. Then I'm driving back. He drove his car down from Tampa. He said, I'm driving back to Tampa, where his main residence was. I said, all right. So I went in and I told my wife, I said, you won't believe it. I said, George just offered me a job. And she said, Steinbrenner? I said, yeah. He said, well, as what? Because he had hotels, he had everything. Yeah. I said, with the Yankees.
That's cool as shit.
And she says, doing what? I says, well, I don't know. But I said, it's, he offered me a job. And I said, what do you think? And it's astounding how astute she was. She said, I'd say no. And I said, you're kidding me. I said, why would you say no? She said, because right now, he's your friend. As soon as you sign up, he's your boss and he's going to break your heart. And I said, well, what? He says, y'all, you six idolize him. You idolize him. You yuck it up. You laugh. You have great times. You said you've seen how he is with his employees. He was brutal. I mean, brutal with employees. I mean, just ran over them. It was, like I said, I said, well, so that whole night, I mean, I couldn't sleep. I was torn. So I went back the next day, and George said, he met me for breakfast, and he says, well, you talk to Debbie? What'd you think? And I said, well, I says, here's what I'll do. I said, I'll agree to come for 1 year. And he said, what do you mean 1 year? And I said, well, I'm agreed to come to 1 year. And I said, because I said, if I don't like it, I said, then I'm going to quit. And I said, I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want you to, I said, and this is going to lead to my next thing. I said, I want to start at the bottom. I said, because I don't want to feel like that you've invested money in me and now I want to quit and now I owe you. I just said, that's just uncomfortable for me. And he said, that's fine. He said, he said, if you don't like it, he said, you have to stay. And he said, I said, where's the bottom at? He says, well, it's scouting, amateur scouting. That's where, but he said, I can't pay you any money. I said, well, right now it's all right. I made a little bit fun. But I said, I'd rather quit down to the bottom when I hadn't,
Yeah, then a position
you got
costly.
Yeah, costly. So he said, all right. He said, well, you do that. And 38 years later, I was still in baseball and that's where I started.
So going into that, I mean, did you have to develop any core skills?
Yeah, I had to.
Did they train you for that?
I'll tell you what I had to do. And again, my typing skills came in when I went there. George put me for the first probably 3 months. I helped back then. There were no computers. There were no. Well, there was computers, but there were no the phone. There was no iPhone, no nothing. Okay. So when a scout wrote a report, he had to write a report in one of those carbon copy 3. They had a white sheet underneath a pink sheet and a yellow sheet.
To write his bills with.
Yeah, exactly, same thing. And they fill it out, and he kept one. He sent gave one to the player and then one to the front office. And the front office would have it, and the little girl had one little computer, and she would enter all the scout reports in. Well, she was overwhelmed, so I got there and I just started helping her. We'd stay till 8 o'clock at night. Matter of fact,
this is in Yankee Stadium, or was it?
No, this is in Tampa.
Okay, this is in Tampa.
This is where that. I'll back up a little bit. George had moved the operations from New York. All the minor league operations were in Tampa. You know,
Smart
Armand
move,
Lake,
though.
yeah,
The beach.
and George was there. You know, George.
That's where he wanted to be.
Hulk Hogan was there.
So he wanted to control everything. Exactly.
Hulk Hogan was there.
He wanted to control everything from Tampa. So we had all of everything was in Tampa. So anyway, she'd fill it out, and I'd fill it out. Matter of fact, she's the secretary for Mickey Loomis, who's the general manager of the Saints.
Yeah.
Her name's Debbie. Well, her name was Debbie Roth back then. But
Can you
anyway,
pull her up, Garrett? She's got to be.
her name's Debbie Gallagher now. She's the Mickey Loomis's secretary. But let's see. Let's go. Anyway, there she. Well, images for Debbie Gallagher. Let's see if she.
So how long did you have to do that?
So anyway, it was. I did that. For 3 or 4 months, you know, and then after that, after I put the reports in at 5 o'clock, I'd leave, and I'd go see guys around the Tampa area that play the Tampa Scouts. I mean, the Florida Scouts had turned in. So I was
What's your typical
learning
number?
how to scout.
Yeah, what's your number of scouts per month? I mean, are kids that you're looking at?
Well, normally a club would have a scout would have. An amateur scout would have 3 states normally. Like when my first job away from Tampa, I had Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. That was the first 3 states I did as an amateur scout. It's called an area scout. And an area scout, you're responsible for every high school, junior college, and college player, amateur playing in that state. And it's your job to evaluate, and if you think he's draftable, write him up. Now, the biggest mistake you can ever make is to let somebody get drafted on draft day and you didn't have him turned in, you know, because that means
you're not doing your job.
Well, that just there's a lot of times guys, you know, shouldn't have been turned in, but other scouts would just turn them in to cover their behind,
right?
In case they were scouts. So that made the job even harder because you had to write up people. Yeah, you knew wasn't going to ever play.
How'd you get your certain players though? Like, I mean, unless they were written up in a newspaper, how'd you find them?
Well, mainly when I first started, it was word of mouth with other scouts. It was a network. Other scouts I became friends with, they said, "Look, you know, we're not going to let you get burnt. You got to come see this kid over in, you know, in Lower Florida, Tallahassee. If he was, because I did have Lower Florida later on, but." If there was a kid in Augusta, Georgia, you got to go see if there was a kid in Macon, Georgia. There's a kid you might want to look at. They'd never tell you what their evaluation was, but it was just you had to go eyeball him. And so that's what we did. And now we did this, fellas. Think about this. We did there was no cell phones. You rode around with a couple of quarters, and
payphone.
You had to find a payphone. Can you imagine some of these rural places in North Carolina, South Carolina? That you were going up into the mountains, and you had to find a payphone somewhere, and on your way to the game, call up, see if it was still on, whether it was raining. You know, it could be raining on your whole way up there, and, you know, and then you get up there and the game was canceled, and you had to make your plans in advance because you couldn't wait around for if they're going to play it the next day. You already had somebody else lined up.
Did you have to drive back? Did you have hotels, or did you? No,
you had to stop. We stayed in Red Roof Inn, La Quintas. You know, all the small hotels. It was, but that's where the camaraderie got was scouts. You know, all we're saying was those back up to hotel. There was no indoors. They were all outdoors. You pulled your car up to the door. You unload your trunk. You put it inside. Well, you know, that's where we'd sit out front and we'd have a couple of cocktails and talk about the kids we'd seen. That's where you learned your guys were from. It was just by word of mouth. You'd read newspapers. You know, local newspapers, you'd pull up and read who was, you know. When
you used to go out and scout in the amateur level, like say a high school,
right?
The parents were scouting you. How did you dress differently? Did you wear Hawaiian shirts? Did you?
Well, we always had radar guns. They could tell by the radar guns. You know, you carry around.
So you got caught.
Yeah, you were done. They knew who you were. You had radar guns because if a kid was throwing. You had to clock him.
Document it.
How many dads were like, "You got to see my boy throw"?
Oh, it was
countless.
I'll never get one. One guy came up one time, and this is awful. He's his kid's throwing, and I got the radar gun. Well, this kid's getting shelled, you know, and I got the radar. And the guy comes up behind me and says, what's he throwing? I said, well, right now, doubles and triples. He's throwing right now. And boy, he said, that's my son you're talking about. You know, he's talking. And I said, I said, sir, I was just joking with you. I'm not, because he was asking how hard he was throwing. Well, the kid was throwing like 84, and he was getting, they were hitting him like they were using ironing boards.
It's got to be cool, though, like, go to these high school games and, like, you still had your concession stand food, which we all love ballpark food.
That's it. That's what
you got up there and you sat on your bench and every.
Now, are you a big sunflower seed guy?
I could not scout a game without sunflower seeds in.
What was your flavor?
You could hickory.
Hickory barbecue.
Yeah.
Or smoke.
Yeah,
Frito-Lay barbecue. They brought them back.
Yeah. We used to, it was just, it was a ritual. We would go to the game. We'd get there. You had to see batting practice. But you had to go to school first. And when most of them would take batting practice school, like in Atlanta, and then they would go, like Jeff Francoeur. I had to go see him take batting practice school, then run to the game, and the game might have been in Gainesville, Georgia. They were playing. So then you ran up there and you saw the game, and then you hit the motel, and the other scouts we'd all try to stay at the same hotel for safety reasons and for to get information. And then the next day we'd head off.
How many scouts work for a professional team?
Normally you had about 30. This is amateur, all amateur. Now, but there's different divisions of scouting. After I did amateur, I became a minor league scout, which completely different ball game. I had to go to the minor leagues.
Is that like the Shuckers?
Yeah, and I had to do A ball, double A, triple A, high A, triple A. I had to do that. I remember when I started minor league scouting. I had the South Atlantic League, which was I had to do the whole Southern Division, which was Macon, Augusta, Greensboro, Fayetteville, North Carolina. You had to go, you had to cover the whole league, and that was the league you had doing. And they would have a scout for each league, basically each team. And then I did that for a while. And then, I stayed with the Yankees from 88 all the way to 2000. And we won a World Series in 96, 98, 99. So 3 out of the 4 years I got a World Series ring from the Yankees.
That's awesome.
And then in 2000, whether it was a dummy move or not, Brian Sabian, who was my original boss with the Yankees when I started, he was a scouting director, and he kind of became my friend and took care of me. Well, he had moved on in 93 to the San Francisco Giants as assistant GM, and then became GM in 95.
Oh, you go with your boy.
And, he kept asking me to come. He kept calling me, and every time we won a World Series, he'd be the first. Now, he's the GM.
Right.
He'd call me and congratulate me, and he'd ask me if I wanted to come over. And I'd say, Brian, I just can't leave George. George was still, I was still friends with George. And
he didn't fire you.
Yeah. And he didn't fire, I was about the only one he didn't fire. So anyway, after we won in 99, I'll never forget, I was doing the Cape Cod League. And the Yankees, we were playing Atlanta. Oh, no, we were playing during regular season in Atlanta. And I wanted to take my son to a game, like that. And for some reason, the guy that had taken charge of the Yankees back then, he said no. He said, well, this was playoff games. He said no. Even though I was scouting in Atlanta, he says, no, we can't do that. Well, I got a little... I figured there was writing on the wall, because at that time George had kind of backed away from the game and had let his sons take over the Yankees. And so I was losing that, kind of relationship. And Brian kept telling me, so in 99 he called, he says, you want to come with the Giants? I said, let's go.
Pay raise?
Yeah.
More money.
Yeah. Twice what I was
making. Did you get a demo?
Making. Twice. Yes.
What was your demo?
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
Yeah, it was a Malibu.
Hell yeah.
Chevy Malibu.
Gas card?
Matter of fact, it was Maui Blue. Don Ho wouldn't have drove this car.
So, what kind of, you got, there's a reason he brought you with you, like, what kind of gals did you scout? How many W's did you make?
The the Yankees, it was Brian had to know me. He couldn't have done it off performance because when I was with the Yankees back then, if you won, you picked last each year in the draft. Now we had 30 scouts. We each had 3 states. We each had 150 guys turned in 100. So
one pick.
You had 1 pick each round. So and you were the last pick, in round. So you're fighting for and it's a tough way to evaluate a scout because what you're doing is you're trying to fill team needs. So I might have had the best pitcher.
Yeah,
in baseball, but we didn't need pitching, and we might have needed a center fielder.
Yeah.
So this guy might have had the fastest center fielder or catcher or first baseman or corner guy. So you picked what needs. So a lot of times you can't evaluate a scout by who he turns in because you're picking by needs. And I remember one year when I had a Georgia Tech, I had no more Garcia Parra. I had the first 5 guys on my list were all-stars at Georgia Tech.
Ooh.
And they went in the first round. Every one of them went in the first round. But I didn't get to me because we picked last in the first round. They were all gone by then.
But how about one of your wins? Like when you did get that pick?
Well, I signed. The biggest pick of mine is with the Giants with Matt Cain, and Matt Cain was he was a 17-year-old out of Houston High School in Tennessee.
Yeah, because baseball now, they draft kids that are 18 years old.
Oh, yeah, Giants.
And Matt became he's on the Wall of Fame for the Giants. He stayed 13 years, and when I drafted him, he was a 17-year-old out of Collierville, Tennessee.
And the cool thing, he's from Dothan, Alabama.
He was born in Dothan, Alabama, and his mama, he had a half scholarship to go to Memphis State back then, and I had to talk his mama into letting him sign because he was our first round draft choice, and his mama really didn't want him to go because she told me, she says, Mr. Elder, I got to tell you something. She says, he's 17 years old. His whole senior, he was a 17-year-old senior. So he was going to be pitching. If he went to the pros, he was going to pitch that summer. He wasn't going to be 18 till like November. Yeah. So he was going to, and so she was afraid of the influence older guys,
She was a good mom.
Drinking. Yeah, she was worried about the kid. And I think the thing that got her, I said, Miss Cain, I said, your son's going to choose between the Giants, who we're putting $1.4 million into him. We're going to watch him every second because we got that kind of investment in him.
$1.4
million. That was going to be the signing bonus. I said, or you can go to Memphis State where
you get hurt.
In other words, after practice, he's at keg parties.
Wow.
After baseball practice, and the coaches don't care where they're at. They're doing baseball, doing football, basketball season. They're at keg parties. So I said, just think about it. And so they decided, and we took him, and he pitched a no-hitter. He pitched a perfect game.
Wow.
Which is only a few in history. Yeah. He pitched a perfect game. He's on the San Francisco Wall of Fame.
He changed that guy's life.
Yeah, he was, and you know what he said? Now I'll give him credit. In his introduction speech, what I saved on, they sent it to me. It was on Twitter. He got up there, and he said the first person I want to thank is Lee Elder, and he said, I remember he walked to my mama's house, and he said he had this big honking ring on his finger. That was my Yankee ring.
Well,
you showed it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's
got to be huge. As a kid that played ball, like whenever somebody walks in with that.
Oh, they walked in. He said, I couldn't take my eyes off that ring. And he said, I told Mama, he said, I want to do it like that. And anyway, 13 years later, we brought him up as a 20-year-old. He and Matt Lincecum, Tim Lincecum, Cain, and Buster Posey, they were pretty much the catalyst of our whole World Series. We won in 10, 12, and 13.
Yeah.
So I won a World Series. Now, the one mistake I had when I left in 2000 with the Yankees, they won again.
Yeah.
So I missed
that was
ring.
like Derek Jeter, A-Rod.
Derek Jeter's first year was 96. The first year he won. That was, we had a nucleus back then that we drafted. And I will say this. The guy behind all of that was that same guy I spoke about, Brian Sabian. He was a scouting director. He was there when we drafted Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Jorge Posada, Andy Pettit. They were all his guys.
Everybody that went to the Giants.
This was our nucleus for the Yankees that we won the 96, 98, 99. They were the all-stars of the Yankees, and they still are today. Today they were Brian Sabian's
they're
guys.
iconic. Right?
They're iconic. And they were Brian Sabian's guys. And so when I came with the Giants,
can you pull up Brian Sabian?
He says, one thing you got to do, take those Yankees rings off. He says, those were supposed to be my rings. He said, you got them and I don't. But then we finally won in 10, 12, and 14.
So you got three
with Brian.
more.
Yeah, and he was he'll be in the Hall of Fame as a.
He looks like a badass.
Yeah, he's from up north of Concord, New Hampshire.
You know what I'm learning about this is about networking.
Yeah,
it's important to network.
Network gets you. I mean,
get you. I mean, let me tell you. Remember when we first started this? I said right place at the right time.
Yeah.
I just happened to be in the right place in the right time. But I'll tell you what I did there. I'll tell you what I did. When I got the chance, I did everything I could to make the most of it. Because sometimes you get it and you don't put your heart into it and you fail, and then that becomes big. I made sure that every move I made, I was going to, fail, whether it be succeed or fail, I was going to give it everything I had, for self-satisfaction. And if I failed, I said, well, you know something? I did everything I could.
Tried.
It just wasn't for me. Or if I did something good, then I felt like, something? I got 6 World Series rings and maybe nobody else has more than me right now.
You know what's cool about your story, though? If you really lay it down, it went from ticket sales to car sales.
To bling.
To being a right-hand man, like pretty much being like a rat pack.
Yeah.
And then go into having a media company, sales, and then selling his media company, sales, and then go in to be a scout, which a scout really is a salesman for players.
Right.
And selling the parents. If he would have told that kid's mom, like, no, he should go to college. He's like, your son is going to get wasted at keg parties, or he can already get a contract.
He's going to get wasted either way.
Yeah. But she didn't know that. No. She didn't know that. And you sold her.
She didn't know that. And he signed for 1.5. And over his career, he made probably $50 million.
Did you get bonuses if you did sign a guy?
No. You got to keep your job.
Okay.
If you didn't
get a Christmas bonus?
No, I didn't.
A Denali or anything?
Now, I'll tell you there's a lot of players did give their scouts that signed them. I forgot who it was, but somebody from the Braves gave their a Denali. Gave them a Denali.
Really?
Yeah.
I think scouts drive Denalis. A black Denali,
Is there like a scout union, like you were saying, like y'all would all kind of stick together, travel together?
Yeah. I mean,
is there anybody that's like looking out for y'all?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had a like in the Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. I had a pack that I ran with in Georgia and South Carolina because that pack usually had Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. So I had that pack I ran it when I did Georgia and South Carolina. And then because I had North Carolina, there was another pack in North Carolina that had North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee. So I had to get with them. And when I went up scouting up there, I ran with them. But you had to network with both of them because they told you where the players were. Because if us three were pals, I don't want you getting fired because you missed a guy in Rolling Fork, North Carolina.
With me next year.
Like that. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a quick story about Matt Cain and how I got Matt Cain. Matt Cain was, like I said, 17-year-old in Collierville, Houston High School, Collierville, Tennessee. And they had just given me Tennessee because the Yankees had fired. The Giants had fired the scout for Tennessee. And so Brian called me up and he says, hey, I know you got Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina.
But I trust you.
He says, would you mind just this year taking Tennessee? And then I'll find somebody for Tennessee. I said, oh, Sabes. I said, my Lord. I said, that's a whole lot of terror. He said, I know. He said, but you yuck it up with the boys. You'll have a good time. And he says, and also he says, he says you can put meal money down wherever you go. Even if you stand at home,
Yeah,
you can write the meal money. So I said, all right. I said, I'll do it. So a friend of mine who was scouting for Cincinnati, his name was Bobby Filati. He had Cincinnati, bro. He had Tennessee, South Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi. And I said, Bobby, I need some names. I said, in Tennessee. He says, well, I'll get you. He said, well, and I'll never forget, we were in LaGrange, Georgia, at a tournament. LaGrange, Georgia, which is right close to the Alabama, state line. And it's down by Columbus. And he says, I'll give you a name. And he gave me the name, and to this day I can't remember who it was. He gave me the name of a kid that was pitching for Houston High School. And he said, they're playing in Mount Brook, Alabama night, which is in Birmingham, which was only 2 hours from me.
Right.
He said, this will save you a trip all the way up to Memphis, Tennessee. He says, and I can't remember it, but he said the kid's supposed to go to the University of South Carolina on a full ride. Said he's a horse. I said, Bobby, thank you. So I snuck out and I left and I drove to Mount Brook, Alabama, and they were playing that night. Mount Brook was playing Collierville. And I get to the ballpark and there's no other scouts there. And I said, oh no. I said, I hope they're not ribbing me and send me on this drive and then when I get back, they yucking it up laughing, So I went to the coach and I asked him, I gave the guy's name. I said, I'm Lee Eld. I'm with the San Francisco Giants, and I come here to see this guy. And he said, he didn't make the trip. He's got mono. I said, oh, Lord. I said, do you have anybody else that can play? And he said, well, yeah. He said, my shortstop's supposed to go to, JUCO here. And I said, he says, kid pitching tonight. He says he's only a 17-year-old, but he's got a partial offer from Memphis State, and I said, all right. I said, well, I'll stay around. I'll see. And this happened to be Matt Cain. So he comes out that night and he's throwing, and he didn't throw hard. I mean, he had good size. I mean, he was 6'2", and he weighed about 190 pounds, but he had the frame that could grow
coachable,
bigger, which you didn't want to scout. You didn't want to give the money to the guys that were 5'10" and 190 pounds because they were going to be 5'10", 190 pounds when they were 24 years old. But the guys that were 6'3", 180 pounds, 170 pounds at 18, when they're 24, they're going to be 6'5", 240 pounds.
You find it fascinating that you know the size of a person and how they're going to grow?
Yeah. I mean, you could just look at their frame and say, this kid's going to put on pounds. When he does, he's going to get stronger. You can steal him. So anyway, I looked at him. He didn't throw hard. He only threw about 89 miles an hour that night, which back then the average fastball, Major League fastball, the average was 89 miles an hour. There wasn't no like it is now. And so, but what got me, I mean, he pitched well. He pitched for 5 innings. He pitched well. But what I noticed about him is he had arm speed. Arm speed calculates into velocity later on. I don't care how big you are. If you got a slow arm, you're not going to gain velocity.
And that's like the whip coming down as you're releasing?
What makes you get faster as you get stronger is the speed of your arm through the zone out front.
And how long did it take you to learn that?
Let me tell you.
There's some of these.
When I first started, I had to learn that, I had to look for soft elbows, like watching an infielder. If you see guys like that with flat elbows, that's like an ironing board effect. When it hits, it's going to bounce out. But a guy that goes to take a ground ball with his elbows coming in like that, they're soft. That means it's all give. And you can even make a mistake, but you're still controlling it. With hitters, you had to learn bat speed in the zone. If somebody had a long swing, might look pretty, but you can't adjust a long swing. When they're throwing breaking balls, you got to be able to whip the bat through the zone, without dragging it through the zone. So guys with long swings you stayed away from. You needed to see hand speed through the zone.
How about catchers?
Catchers, one thing only. Straight arm speed, throwing down to second. throwing down to second, how quick they release, quick release down to second. Now second of all, it's how they blocked. Whether they could get down and block it, keep the ball in front of them. But what catches you, the way we used to build a team with the Yankees that we were taught is you had speed up the middle, okay, power on the corners. That's where you got it from. And when I mean speed up the middle, you had to have the shortstop and second baseman had to be quick and have range. So you gave up power there because they were using smaller guys that were fast and quick. So you gave up power there. Center fielder, usually you need your fastest guy out there. He's usually a real thin guy that can really run. So you think you're giving up power there. The guys on the corners, they don't have to worry about running being fast. You want the big guys out there that's got power. On the corners, first base, third base, big guys, power. They don't have to have range. They got a small area to cover, right? 2 steps one way, 2 steps the other way. Shortstop's got to go back and forth, behind third, behind the bag, second base the same way, behind the bag, behind first. So that's how you
ever thought about doing a book for like dads?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it'd be like Lee Elder, like dad's checklist for kid with baseball.
Yeah, well, ironically, the first thing I tell parents, I used to tell parents, let your kid.
Horrible title.
Let your kid play every sport.
Yeah.
You know why?
Find one he's good at, one he likes.
Not only find one, but the parents nowadays, what they do is they get so enamored with these travel teams and specialty teams. They want them to play baseball on these travel teams all year round. Guess what? When you play each sport, you're using a different set of muscles every sport you play. A different set is learning muscle memory. So if you play football, you're using completely different set of muscles. If you play soccer, completely different set of muscles.
Right.
Basketball, complete. Now, what happens when you play baseball and all of a sudden those baseball muscles are failing you? In other words, you're not, okay? You know what the athlete has? He's got those secondary muscles that he played track with, played football with, to kick in, to give him value defensively, stealing the base, running, a quickness. So let your kid play all the sports, and then at the end, like you said, at the end, the sport that he's gonna excel in will come to the top, just like a foam. It'll come to the top, and he'll know the greatest athlete we ever had when I was with the Yankees was Dion. I mean, Dion came out there and he ran. We'd run 40-yard dashes with it. He was running 4.2, 4.3, 40-yard. That's world class. That's Olympic
Playing
speed.
Football and baseball.
You're talking about prime.
Okay. I mean, he was incredible. John
He's
Elway
doing a hell of a job now in Colorado.
When John Elway came, we drafted John Elway. He got
real quick though. Can we go back to what you're talking about? The parents. Do you have advice? Let's say for the parents forcing their kids to play. What do you think about that?
Well, if you force a kid to do something, okay, he's going to fail in the end because if a kid doesn't, it's just like any other phase of life. If you smoke, drink, take drugs, alcoholic, the only way you're going to stop is if you want to stop. Okay, so trying to force a kid to play something that he's not in love with, okay, he's not going to make it.
All right, dads out there, you hear this?
Yeah,
it's a real professional here, so take it easy.
You got to.
Bad dad.
The problem with every dad, and I was like that with my son to a certain extent. You just can't help it. Even though I knew the trials and tribulations, is you almost want to live your life through your kid. You want your kid to be what you couldn't be, and you force him to try to be what you wanted to be, rather than what the kid wants to be and what he likes.
Yeah.
What he likes.
That's facts.
Let him play what he likes. Let me tell you, if he's a soccer player, so what? You know how much money soccer players are making now? Go see what Messi just signed for.
Yeah.
Ronaldo.
$1.5 billion, right?
Yeah, right. You see what these basketball players are making? You see golfers. They used to laugh at golfers. I'd love to be a professional golfer. Right, but so let your kids do what they want. You'll know, but let them play all the sports, and he'll tell you which one he likes.
Yeah, and the scout will tell you if he's good or not.
And guess what? The best thing you can do is for your son to come up to you and say, "Dad, you know something? I was a pretty good high school player. I'd probably be a pretty good college player. Because I could get him anywhere I wanted. I could get him on any team he wanted." He was a catcher. He was a quarterback at Lakeside High School. But he said, you know what I'd like to do, Dad? He said, I'd like to go to Ole Miss and see what I can make of myself. Right now, he's a CPA in Atlanta. Got a great family. And he loves sports. He listens to every podcast. He's probably listening. He's going to listen to this one. He's an Ole Miss. We talk. We go to games together. He loves it. He's got 2 little girls.
Do you still scout now without scouting?
Yeah, I was going to ask that too. Like, you're retired. I mean, do you go to games? Is your eye there? Do you still have connections? Like, hey, you got to come check this guy out.
Ironically, after you do it for 38 years, you're on the road, you're in airplanes, especially with me being a major league scout. In other words, I had all 30, all 15 American and 15 national. I was on a plane every day, 3 days, another plane, 3 days, hotels. Now, they gave us the A hotel rooms, first class flights, but you know who's sitting at your home?
Priceless.
Your wife, yeah, 51%. She's sitting at home, and she's making sure the family's being raised.
So you're
right.
kind of like you're offshore. I mean,
yeah. And so I decided when I stopped, when I called it quits, which I didn't after the 20 season, and I had a contract for 21, 22, and 23. I could have stayed but I said once I quit, then I'm going to be back home again, and I'm going to make up for the lost time Now, she went to almost every place. A lot of places I went, Brian Sabian would let us take the wives. So when I'd go to New York and do the Yankees or the Mets, she could come stay in the hotel.
Do Michelin restaurants?
Hotel, every one of them.
Oh, that was
and
awesome.
Something about Brian, I'll tell you what he was. He was a scout before he was
Scout first.
He was a scout first. So,
Scouts, man.
So he knew what that road, how lonely that road was. So he made sure that whenever we could bring our wives, stay in a hotel room with us, on them, he knew it. He'd pay us that meal money. He knew he knew you put in an extra little bit. But that's the kind of guy you wanted to work for your whole life. Absolutely. So she got to go to all the places, all the big cities I got to go and everything. But still, when you call it quits, you want to spend husband time with her.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've done. So, she lets me watch college football and NFL football. And if she goes sleep and the Giants come on, I watch the Giants, I watch the Yankees. But no, do I sit there? I used to have the MLB package where I'd have 8 games up there. Yeah. But now it's just, if I do that, I'll get back into that scouting mode again.
Yeah.
I have a question though from Steve Colson, Celivate, and he said he goes, how many did he pass up on? How many misses? Like when it came to a couple people you were scouting. Do you ever feel like you were like, man, I knew that boy was? Yeah,
I'll tell you the guy that he pitched in Mississippi State. He was a closer. He went on to Boston Red Sox. He was their closer to the Boston Red Sox. He became an all-star. What's his name?
I just remember Palmero, but that ain't him. That's who they named like their best.
Oh no, well, at Mississippi State, Will Clark and Palmero, but it was
Jim Howard.
And Jim Howard, but
there had to be a miss.
He was a relief pitcher at Mississippi State. Jonathan Papelbon, that's him.
Okay.
Papelbon. Now Papelbon. I'm sitting we used to go to the SEC tournament every year in Birmingham. Well, I got Mississippi State. Well, Papelbon was a 21-year-old sophomore. So that means he was. Here's when you're eligible in college. Once you get out of high school, you're eligible. Or if you go to a junior college, you're eligible.
4 years.
Each year, junior college, you're sophomore. So basically, you're eligible unless you go from high school to college. Your first and second year, your freshman, sophomore year in college, you're not eligible. You can't sign. Okay, so anyway, he was a 21-year-old, unless you're 21. Once you become 21, you're eligible, no matter what grade you're in. So he was a 21-year-old sophomore. And so Ron Polk had made him he was a starter. He got shelled as a starter. He made him a a Wednesday starter, middle of the week starter. He got shelled. He didn't have a curveball. He had a little bit of arm strength, but it wasn't. He couldn't command the ball. So, you know, I didn't turn him in. I didn't put a report in on him. And so we get to the SEC tournament. Now, Dick Tidrow, who's an ex-major leaguer, who was our he was our assistant vice president of baseball operations. He knew pitchers. He was you can pull up Dick Tidrow if you get it. He was an ex-Yankee.
So his real name's Richard.
Ex-Chicago Cubs pitcher. He had the handlebar mustache, or he had the Fu Manchu mustache. He was Dick Tidrow was one of the old time stars, you know, but he knew pitchers. So that's him. That's Dirt. We called him Dirt.
Dude, I bet you'd be dope to party with, though. Ain't gonna lie to you.
He just passed away last year. He was. I really hated that. He was supposed to be a general manager of a team. He never got the chance. Wow. And it's a shame. But anyway, Tidrow comes with me, and he's looking at Papelbon warming up, you know, and he says, "The Papelbon's a big boy," and he says, "How about that Papelbon kid? What's the deal with him?" I said, "Dickie, you know, he runs out there about 90, 91 miles an hour, but he's got no breaking ball, no command." I said, "They tried him as a shot." I said, "He's eligible. He's a 21-year-old sophomore, you know, so he's got 2 more years eligibility, so he's not going to sign unless you throw the bank at him. You know, he's not stupid." And he said, "Okay, that's good." So anyway, sure enough, somebody drafted, and they drafted him, and they offered him 240,000 signing bonus, which was huge, you know. And he didn't take it. Well, Tidrow's looking at me because I don't even have it turned in. And I said, he said, "Okay." He said, "Whatever you say is good." So sure enough, he turns it down. I said, "See, I told you, you know, it wouldn't have been worth it. We couldn't pay this guy $240,000. You can't draft him. $240,000, you'd have had to draft him in the 3rd round, and he was drafted like the 19th round or something, 20th round. Right. So he says, "Okay," the next year. They tried him again, started, didn't do it. Anyway, they tried to make him a closer, you know. Same thing, tournament, SEC, Tidrow's there. I don't have him turned in again. Said, "Same thing, Dick." He says he's got another year. He's not going to sign. Anyway, I shouldn't have done that. Because I let the dollar signs cloud up that he did have some ability, because I saw improvement in a breaking ball. And if he's starting to throw harder, he got like to 92, 93, and he was starting to show signs of a breaking ball. So I should have turned him in. I didn't. Anyway, he got drafted by Red Sox in the second round, something like that. They gave him a ton of money. He became an all-star closer. He became anyway. But that's when you.
What a great story, though. Like, because
you let people. You let people. You just can't. You can't make decisions on emotion.
Right.
You know.
Well, you got to keep in mind, though, that there's not that many scouts, either. So, like, to have, you're in that field. I mean, you've had some losers when you've got somebody signed and they're not been what you thought they were. So it works different ways. But then you get that one guy, the pitcher that you're like, your son's not going to keg parties, and then he makes millions and gets more contracts and like takes care of his siblings, his family,
forever.
His whole city.
I think the biggest plus for me that I ever had, and once again it's to this same line of questioning, is that I didn't let my emotions come into value. When I was with the Yankees, Steinbrenner was he wanted big people. If you drafted anybody under 6'2" with the Yankees,
was he like a Jerry Jones?
Yeah, worse than Jerry Jones. He made Jerry Jones look like Mary Poppins. George Steinbrenner almost had, if they were under 6'2", you better not draft them, because you're going to feel his wrath. He thought big, power, dominant, like almost the German,
that's why Deion Sanders.
Domination. Yeah, it was, you had to be He wanted men. George,
best of the best.
you better not come out without any little people running around.
Did you ever get to meet Dion?
Oh yeah. I met him.
Was he real flashy back then?
Well, you know what he said when
He's
he
still
was
flashy.
You know what he said right before he got drafted.
the old Dion.
The best story, best interview I ever saw. I think it was Green Bay was going to had first pick, and his name was being mentioned for the first pick. He didn't want to go to Green Bay. He'd play in the cold, everything. He wanted to somewhere else. He didn't want to. So somebody was interviewing him. He's from Fort Myers. He was at Florida State. And he said, Dion, they said, we heard Green Bay's gonna draft you. He's got his sunglasses on. He got 80 pounds of gold chains hanging around.
Shirtless.
He says, if Green Bay drafts me, he said, I'll ask for so much money they'll have to put me on layaway to get me. And he scared him off right then. He scared him all off. But he was one of the best athletes I've ever seen. But getting back to, George wanting a big man, and I was raised in scouting that way. And I hated little guys because George was right. I mean, a big man's going to beat a little man every time in most things, whether except for speed and quickness. But if it's power and strength, George wanted him hitting them out of
home runs.
Yankee State. Yeah, he wanted home runs. He didn't care about 1-1 games. He wanted to annihilate everybody. So I grew up like that, looking at. Well, in 2012, this is when I'm second to Sabes in the pecking order, and we've already won the 2010 World Series. Brian calls me up one time, and I was in Houston, and he said, and at this time I was living in they had moved me to Scottsdale, Arizona, because that's where our spring training was. He wanted me around the, decision making. So he said, "Where are you at?" And I said, "Houston." He said, "I need you to fly to Colorado." I said, "Colorado? For what?" He said, "Oh no, excuse me." He said, "Not Colorado. You can go back home to Arizona. Colorado's playing Arizona, so you can go back home. Take it." I said, "What do you want me to go there for?" He said, I got your guy I want to see. This is at the halfway point, the trade deadline.
Yeah.
And he says, "I got a guy I want you to give me your thoughts on." I said, "Who is it?" He said, "Marco Scutaro."
Can you pull him up?
I said, "Marco Scutaro?" I said, "Brian, I could eat soup off his head." I said, I said, "He's got to be 5'8". He's a second baseman. I said, he's got average. He's got below average range. He's got a below average arm. He can only play second base." I said, he's played for Boston for 7-8 years. I said, "I know that. I've seen this guy a million times." I said, "What do you want me to go see him for?" He said, "Just go see him and tell me if he can hit second in the order for us." I said, "All right, Sabe." I said, "I'll go see him." So I get on a plane. I go back home and started playing a 3-game series. And I already got him, I've never turned in a good report on Marco Scutaro even when he was at Boston, And I said, "Well, okay." I said, "I'll try to look at this with an open mind." So I go there. He goes 0 for 12, 3 games, got up 4 times each game. He goes 0 for 12. Okay, then after the last game, Brian called me, and he says, what'd you think? I said, "We don't have this guy." He said, "So you like him?" I said, "Right now for us, he's a key." He said, "What?" I said, "He went 0 for 12. But I said, 10 of those 12 times, I said, he hit the ball right on the nose. He just hit it right at somebody. I said he hit lasers. And I said, he didn't strike out in all 12. He handles the bat. He's not afraid to go take a count 3-2, go deep in a count. I said, it's perfect for what you want, because we had Angel Pagan was our center fielder, a leadoff hitter. He was getting on base. We had nobody to move him over to second base. Hit behind him, take some pitches so he can steal a base. I said, he's perfect for us.
He can hit where he wants.
If you're looking for a second place hitter, this is the guy. I said, now, is he the range is below average? So the arm's below average. But if that's what we're looking for, somebody hits second and it's going to make us stronger. So you can't pick a better guy than this guy. You need to trade for him. So we traded for him. You got to hold your breath when you do stuff like this. held our breath. We won almost 70% of the final month and a half game. We go to the playoffs. He gets MVP of the playoffs.
Wow.
MVP of the NCS Series and almost the World Series. Now, it was lightning in the jug. He had a phenomenal second half. I mean, the last half after we traded for him, but he did everything that we were looking for 10 times more than I expected he could be. It was catching lightning in a jug, but I just went there and I looked at him, not as I would have looked at him normally. Being small, and I've already written bad grade. I looked at him could this guy help our team, and really look at him with an open mind, and that's what happened.
I mean, that's what makes you a well-rounded scout, probably too.
That's
experience also.
Yeah, I mean, most guys would have looked at now how they're running baseball nowadays. I don't think I could scout because they do it by analytics. If an analytic guy goes to this and they look at him striking out or going 0 for 12, that means his on-base percentage is low. Okay, looking at him with a below average arm, that means his range is low. So they're going to put, then they're going to say, they're not going to give this guy a second look. But I was looking at this guy the old-time baseball way for a specific purpose, to fill a need. Not to be the best guy on the team.
But you also were used to being a part of the
Yankees
and always scouting last, like getting the last pick.
Yeah.
So your mindset was always
like that.
Going to have the last pick. So you're like, I'm going to find somebody that nobody really wants.
That could help.
Yeah.
That could help.
Sick.
With the analytics coming in, and I kind of was there, but I didn't remember it. I was a kid. But the movie Moneyball did a good depiction of it. Did you see that movie, Moneyball?
Yeah, and Billy Beane is still a good friend of mine. And,
okay.
and this is not a knock against Billy, because Billy Beane he's the GM of the Oakland Athletics, and he also owns 5% of the team.
Really, I didn't know.
So
that. I know it was.
And Billy's done. But Billy's idea with Moneyball was to look for the undervalued player. We all did that.
Right.
From the time that's exactly who we always want to look for. The undervalued player, the guy like DeMarco Scudero, the undervalued player. He just happened to catch lightning in a jug because he signed anyway, he signed this guy.
Who he signed?
And that's the season that he signed him, that the whole Moneyball was about. His name was
Chris Pratt.
Hatterberg.
That's what I'm thinking, Chris Pratt, but I noticed
it was Hatterberg.
Hatterberg, okay. That's what I was thinking, Chris Pratt. I'm like, that was a movie.
It was Hatterberg, and Hatterberg was just just a so-so
average, yeah.
Filling the type, and not going to be the star on any team. Going to fight Scott Hatterberg. Going to fight for his place. But then he just Billy Beane happened to get him for nothing, and he went on his tear like Scudero did. He went on his tear, and the Athletics won like 21 in a row. It was one of the longest streak. If he can pull that up, it was like 20 or 21 games in a row that Oakland won that year, and it vaulted them to the playoffs. Never did win the World Series,
right.
But it vaulted in the playoff, and all of a sudden, every writer wanted to. It was 20 games in a row, I think. Every writer wanted to write about the 20 wins in a row, and
I mean, that's a big deal.
They wrote, yeah, it is. I mean, that's hard to do, but they fashioned it around Moneyball, saying looking for the undervalued, scraping the bottom, getting the bottom feeders, and instead of paying all these guys
everybody's trying to look for a deal.
Everybody's trying to get
diamond in the rough.
You don't want to go get the $100 million guy. You
can go get Ohtani tomorrow, and you can pay him $500 million
because you already know about him.
Yeah, he's no secret. And what he did, and the reason why Billy has always been successful is because he's always is trying to get, because of their budget, he's trying to get, he can't afford to go after the Ohtanis and the big ball players. So he's got a bottom feed. So what he does, he turns the roster over with these, and if you become a star in Oakland and you're going to get money, then you trade you.
Who's the person that makes the decision with the money though? Like, so you're the scout. Are you sitting at the table when y'all going, we're giving $10 million? Who makes the decision?
The decision ultimately always is the owner. You got to go. We had to always go to Steinbrenner if we were going to give somebody a big contract. We always had with the Giants, we had to go to our owner and we had to get the okay because, I mean, when you're giving nowadays.
It's their money.
Yeah, when you're giving guy Mike Trout, $400 million for 10 years, $40 million a year on a 10-year or 20-year whatever. Now, who's paying for the television money's paid because the national television network gives gives every club
contract
enormous. They get enormous piece and you're getting your cable money, plus you're getting merchandise, concession stands, everything. So money's never going to be a problem in baseball. We went through that recession in 2008 or whenever. We never skipped a beat. We didn't even know there was one. Had no idea. There's so much money in. They got a company called the Major League Licensing Bureau. They own the licensing right to every single major league logo.
Really?
So
you got to go through them to get any kind of merch or anything done.
If your hat has an NY from New York, okay, the logo for that hat is owned by Major League Licensing Bureau. They pay each team. They pay them a percentage to own that logo. Okay, now here's how much money's in baseball. Major League Licensing Bureau owns the rights to all the paraphernalia sold in baseball. They in turn give every major league team a percentage that they take in sales.
Sold.
Yeah, let's say 30%.
Probably a bunch.
30% goes to Major League Baseball. Say they give 30%. Okay, Major League Baseball then turns around and gives each one of their 26 men on the roster a percentage of what they got.
Really?
And they give this to the players at spring.
So like Jeter's getting a shit ton of money for his merch.
Well, at spring training, they would give each player, coach, and manager on a 25-man roster, they would give them an equal percentage of what they got from the major league team. Major league team gave what they got from the license bureau. You know what the check? The last year I had the check for each player was as a little
$100,000.
$540,000.
Wow.
That's how watered down it got. So you know how much money just in flags and caps and logos on your pencils.
Did you ever get free stuff?
All the time. I got 2 closets, 2 attics full of Yankee stuff and Giant stuff because you know what they do now. They give away giveaways at every game.
Yeah.
You walk through, somebody sponsors something. What they don't give away, they give them to employees at the end of the year. They just send them. I get boxes.
You become a hoarder?
I got them up there.
The Yankees hoarder?
I'll give them away to the kids in the neighborhood.
Hit you up.
So who are we rooting for to win the World Series this year?
Well, I got to say.
Who's your team? Your loyalty is.
Well, honestly, Brian Cashman, who's the GM of the Yankees, he and I started together with the Yankees. I was Brian Sabian's assistant, and he was Mitch Lukovic's assistant, who was a player development. So me and Cash, we've been, we stayed with the Yankees until I left to go to Giants. We've been friends ever since. And Brian Sabian now just went to work for the with the Yankees. So I do have feelings for the Yankees.
A little biased.
But the guy in my roast, Bruce Bochy, who's gone in the Hall of Fame as a Giants manager. As Giants manager, and he was San Diego's manager for 12 years before he was ours for 12. So he's
in the game.
He's right there at one of the winnest managers, and he's gone immediately into Hall of Fame 5 years after he's out. Well, he was we've been such close friends. He came to my roast. He came all the way down.
That's cool.
To the roast, and he sat there and he spoke at my roast, and he and I talk at least twice a week. Just on we've just become fast, dear friends. And he's now, he resigned from the Giants in 2000. Let's see, I guess it was 2018 was his 2019.
Who put the roast on?
Biloxi First. School said he resigned in 2019. He managed the Padres. You can see up there, he managed the Padres for 12 years, then got us for 12 years. So, and it had some heart problems. He had a couple of stents put in.
Coaching might do that to you.
Yeah, it's you're on pins and needles. The only coach that's got to be in worse shape are basketball coaches.
Yeah,
because they're red faced and fat. But Boch, he decided. Matter of fact, the night of the roast, I'll tell you this: the night of the roast, I met him at the Bow. Because he was at the Bow. I got him roomed at the Bow, and we were sitting at. And he says, "I got to tell you something." At dinner that night before the roast, and I said, "What's that?" And he says, "I'm negotiating with the Texas Rangers to become their new manager." And I said, "You're joking." And he says, "No." And he says, "Matter of fact," he says, "I'm waiting on a call from the owner tonight." And I said, "Why?" And while we were sitting there eating, the owner called. He got up and he left. And he came back and he said, "You can't tell nobody." I said, "All right." He said, "I'm the new manager of Texas Rangers."
On your roast. On your roast night.
On my roast night.
Y'all had some bourbons.
I said, we look like Otis and Mayberry when we came out.
That's fine.
But anyway, he told me, he said, he gave me a 3-year contract. And so, who are you going to put? I got to pull for him.
I pull for the fam, dude.
I pulled for him, and he turned a team that finished dead last year. They were, until about 3 weeks ago, they led the American League, their division, American League, up. And now they're fighting for the wild card right now, but they're still in, but they're fighting for the wild card.
So if he called you right now and was like, "Hey, I got a guy you need to look at,"
he texted me.
Would you get on an airplane and go look at the kid?
He texted me 2 hours ago. Who's
that kid in Biloxi?
He heard something funny. No, they won't. You know something? I've had scouts call me and said, "Have you been in any of Shucker games?" And I said, "No." I'll be honest with you, no, I hadn't.
Too hot.
Yeah. I mean, you sit out there, you're really suffering. And I said, "No, I hadn't." But and they said, "Well, have you heard of this guy like that?" And I got to be honest with them. I said, "I haven't." If for me to answer them and give them thing, I've got to
go all in.
They're family life.
Yeah, I've
now.
got to be. Yeah,
you're all family.
It really is.
That's respect, man.
It's
You
just.
did it.
I did it, and I enjoyed it. I was blessed beyond. I mean, the blessings I've had in my life that I've kind of outlined for y'all, going from in high school to not being a real good athlete, but being good enough to at least be on a team
and being the top salesman in the world,
or getting by the Charlie in Vietnam.
Yeah. And one thing I left out, and I was a golfer. Loved golf, just loved golf. Well, in 19,
you beat Bobby Mahoney?
No, not now. He plays 3 times a week.
Shout out Dean.
But in 1994, I was so bored. I'd come home I was living in Augusta at the time, but I was so bored because I'd come home and I didn't have to go back to spring training until February, March. So I'd go out there and hit practice balls, golf balls, just by myself. Everybody else was working. This is like teaching. Yeah. So I decided I needed a part-time job. So one of my friends told me, he says, he said, "They're looking for caddies at Augusta National." I said, "You kidding me?"
That's pretty sweet.
He said, "No." So I went up to the Augusta National, and there was a Pinkerton guard at the gate. He said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I heard they're looking for caddies. Augusta National part-time." He said, "Just a minute." He went in, he took me and he rode me down to the caddy shack on first time I've been at Augusta grounds. And he says, there was this guy named Tom Van Dorn. And Tom Van Dorn, he and another friend of his started CMI, which is Caddy Management, CME, Caddy Management Enterprises. And what it was is they started a caddy program, a professional caddy program, and they went around to like Pinehurst, and they went to places in Red Stick and these famous places, and they and they what they did is they put they trained caddies, they got them professional caddies, they interviewed them, this had never been done for a caddy program, because Augusta National caddies had been old black caddies that had been there since they were 13 years old, just around the area that was their jobs, just carrying for Augusta National, and they used to, when they used to have the Masters, the pros used to have to use Augusta National caddy because they knew the course, and but anyway, I went in there and he said, I said, a friend told me about y'all look for caddies. I said, I can't imagine. Why would you? He said, well, here's the deal. He said, Augusta National hired us because they were having problems with the caddies that were out here. And he said, number one, he said, they weren't showing up for work. Once they got paid, they're out somewhere, and they didn't. And you have to have a caddy for these members. These are the most famous members in the world at this, and there was only 314 of them. And he said, we gotta have, they're having trouble. They're not taking out taxes or whatever. They got to straighten up the caddy program. So he said, they've hired us to take it over. And he says, here's my problem. He said I think they had 113 caddies. He said we had to fire 87 of them because they had to give them all background checks.
Drug test,
and that eliminated most of them out there, So he said, I need caddies quick. And I said, well, I got to tell you. I said, I'm only home. Now Augusta National is only open from October 15th to May 15th. They're closed all summer. There's nobody playing Augusta National in the summer ever. They're closed. That's when they do the work and change holes and change things. So I said, I got to tell you, I'm with the New York Yankees. And I said, I'm only home from October to March. Then I'm on the road. He says, I don't care. He said, if you promise me you'll show up every day, because I told him I'd played golf. I knew how to play golf. I was in. He said, if you show up every day, he said, the only days we're closed are Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. He said, you got to show up every day. He said, I'll give you full-time status, even though you can't stay here from October to May. He said, I'll give you full-time status, which means you get to pick your chip out of the bag every morning first, or when your chip's drawn out, you get to go in the bag so you can put your name and maybe have a bag every day, and get paid every day.
Yeah.
I said, I'll show up every day. I'll give you my word on that.
Could you talk about the pay?
Yeah, we made $55 an 18 a round, okay, and then whatever gratuity the member wanted to give us, and I'll try, I hope I'm not going too long, but I'll tell you.
No, you're good.
Tell you a story, a funny story out there, and we had a little sheet, and they still do it that way today, and it had the member number, and you wrote the member number, and whoever the member was, whether it was Michael Jordan or he wasn't a member, but and like Frank Broyles, Arkansas AD, and he used to coach Arkansas. He was a member. Write them. Bill Gates. Write the numbers down, and then you put 55 if they played 18. If they played 36, it was 110, and then if they played the par 3, which most of them did during the day because they wanted to, then it was another 27.50, half of the 55. So and then whatever tip you got, and that's how they paid the caddies. And the member, it was all charged to the members. Now, what you didn't want to do is you didn't want to put your chip with the member. You want to put it with one of his guests because
they wanted to come back.
Well, and they wanted to tip more.
They wanted the guests were told not to tip, that the member was taking care of it. Well, the member would put the regular whatever, then $25 tip, real.
The guest felt guilty. Well, throw you them bones.
Well, the guest, yeah. I mean, can you imagine walking around with a guy for 4 days out there and for $18, and all of a sudden, you're not saying, "Hey, pal, put this in your pocket when you win." Well, now I'll tell you some, like Michael Jordan. Uh-huh. He gave each one in a group $500 a day tip. $500 a day.
He's also a billionaire.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood. He gave me $200 a day. Michael Douglas gave me $200 a day. Now, the one that the very last year I was there, which was 2005. The 2 new members they let in. Then now they always held it around 314 members. You know, if somebody quit, they would put you in. The 2 members that came in were Bill Gates and Lou Holtz. That were the 2 members that came in.
That's sick.
Well, when it opens in October, they let them play for a week, bring in guests. Then the second weekend is a member tournament. And that means it's only members come in. They can't bring any guests. And they have a big tournament, 4 members to a team, and they play for money. You know, they play. I mean, it's great, you know.
Cars.
So anyway, I come in, and I got ready to put my chip in a bag, and Tom Van Dorn says, Lee, come in here. Come to my office. So he says, don't put your chip in a bag. I said, why? I'm not going to get a bag. He says, no. He said, I'm going to put you with Coach Holtz because you're a sports guy, and he's a new member. It's first time out here. He said, I'm going to put you with him. I said, oh, great. I said, that'd be perfect. Yeah, I'd enjoy it. I don't know what kind of tip. I don't know, but I enjoy it. So he puts me with Coach Holtz. So we had a great time. And he actually shot like 84. He chipped in like twice. Well, he wasn't a bad player, you know. And so at the end of the day, he says, now, Lee, how'd I pay you? You know, I'm a new member. How'd I pay you? I went through the whole thing. I said, well, Coach Holtz, you know, here it is. I showed him, you know, here's your number. $55 is what the fee is. Said, next line's gratuity, not needed, just if you feel like it, you know. Then total it up, sign it, then turn it in, and they'll charge you for it. He said, great. He said, give me the thing. Pointing. Gives it back to me. I said, yes, sir. Well, I said, it's been a pleasure. He said, now, Lee, I'm not going to be here tomorrow. He said, I know that you can lose a bag, but he said, I got to go back to South Carolina. He was coaching the Gamecocks. I said, oh, okay. Well, she enjoyed it. So I went back in, opened up, $55. He had written down a $300 tip. I said, wow, it's great. So the next day I come in, I know I don't have a bag. Tom Van Dorn comes in, he says, got your bag. I says, who? He says, Bill Gates. That was his first year. He was a member. I said, oh, no. Now I got visions of Microsoft stock, everything as a tip. I said, oh, Lord. He comes out there, and if you ever see somebody that fits a prototype.
That's him.
I walked
He's
out
like a
there.
robot. He's like a calculator.
He had on like regular pants, tennis shoes, hat cocked out, you know, like a computer, like you'd think of.
Straight computer nerd.
Yeah. And I mean, the ball's gone all over the place. And it was brutal. He shot like 100 and whatever.
What would you write on the paper?
Well, I gave him, at the end of the thing, same thing. I gave him the spiel, 55 tip, you know, whatever. Here it is like that. He said, oh, no, give me a double handshake. He said, I want to take care of you. Give it to me, boy. I ran back to the thing. I peeked in it.
Can I guess?
Yeah.
$5,000.
$15.
Oh, shit.
Now, let me tell you.
Shit.
Let me tell you.
That's disappointing.
Richest man. Now, let me tell you. Here's what his thought process was.
He played like shit.
He thought he was tipping 30%. He thought 55 was the thing. He thought he was tipping 30%, which is above and beyond. But see, he's a businessman and not a sports guy.
Yeah.
He's taking over the world right now.
Where sports guys, like, they
understand.
Yeah.
Oh, I've gotten $1,200 tips before, $1,000 tips from, you know, gunslingers. We call them the gunslinger. They understand.
Yeah.
You know, they understand. Michael Jordan, $500 a day to every caddy in the group, not just his. I mean, you know, that's how they are. But, you know, the business, Warren Buffett was
It's a pretty crazy ass life.
Yeah. Oh, let me tell you,
yeah.
I've been blessed beyond anybody supposed to be blessed.
Would you be interested in come back on?
I would. Anytime. I've enjoyed this. I really have.
Good. We have too, man.
Because we, the baseball it's.
Well, you're a person. You got a full life. I mean, you're more than a scout.
I've had a full life. I've done a lot of things, and but you know something. I always said I was going to come back to Biloxi when it was all over. Because I grew up in Biloxi. Maybe we can talk more about the early Biloxi.
So we do
the 60s and 70s.
We've been doing this probably close to 4 years, and it's always when we have guests on. it's like a chapter 1,
Yeah.
chapter 2, and like you can look at. We've had Ivan Spinner on 7 times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you look at like who we've had Matt McDonald.
Yeah.
They've sponsored us for the Coliseum a few times. Michelle and Matt. Matt's the director. Michelle, she played softball for Alabama. So
For a national championship.
yeah.
Yeah.
And she's the assistant director. So we kind of know the Coliseum. We've done Crawfish Fest.
Yeah.
But they've been on and, repeat the cycle and learn more about people. But no, you have a fascinating life, man. Like,
Yeah, we've appreciated just getting to peek in a little bit.
I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy relating. I'm a talk. Something my wife says I'd make a Jehovah's Witness get back on the bike sometimes. Said I talk too much, but I enjoyed it because something. I've been blessed. I was in the right place, right time, and I like to tell people about it. How blessed I've been. It was just being in the right place, right time. Not anything I did, but the one thing I did do is I made sure, like I said, that I took advantage of the situation I was put in.
that's badass.
And
that is really a badass.
And that's about.
So let's go with. So I want to get a couple sponsors out of the way.
Okay.
We already got our sponsor list. Not sponsor, but we got Carter's Champions. We got Boot Scootin' Boobies at Ground Zero, Biloxi, September 30th. It's going to be one hell of a lineup. Get your tickets at Ground Zero, Biloxi. We also have a guitar signed. It's a pink guitar, a Gretchen, signed by Willer. Was it Willer Walker Jr.? Guys, you can get tickets there. TFMentertainment.com. And then you got the Hologross coming up.
Yep, October 28th. Big time drawdown. Crew Neptune's putting it on at the Nativity Sacred Heart Center.
Right.
It's costume contest, chance to win money, cash prizes, food, booze. So
Nice, yeah.
It's been a good event.
And then in October 21st, downtown Gulfport, we have the Pink Dress Run. You can get your tickets at pinkdressrun.com. 100% of the money we raise goes to Memorial Hospital Foundation. We're raising money for the boobies, okay? They're boobies. We're saving the boobies and having fun drinking beers with our buds.
Honk, honk.
Hong Kong.
Yeah. But we love to have you on. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's more like, it's more of a chapter.
Yeah.
You have more to life to talk to us stories. I was going to get to the point where I wanted to dive in Vietnam and the bards talk.
Yeah.
But we can go back to that. We can go back to Biloxi. I think I'm grateful to have you back on the coast.
Yeah. Grateful to be
You've
here.
done some cool ass shit and you came back.
And thank you so much for sharing with us.
Oh, my pleasure
Awesome.
indeed.
Awesome.
My pleasure indeed.
All
Sure, enjoy.
right, guys.
And
see
we
y'all
love
next
you.
time. Yeah.
All righty.
Give us a like, click, follow.
Follow.
Peace out. Share.
Share.
Gulf South Productions, Daniel Lozada and the team. Festivals, raves, birthday parties, weddings.
Loxicom,
Because you want a smart house, don't you?
home automation,
Golden Gulf Insurance Services.
home,
Home insurance.
auto, commercial, bonds.
Life insurance.